The most surprising background of someone you thought you knew? Part 2. A janitor at a gas station where I worked was a shy man from Albania. Once we grabbed some beers after closing. He told me that before moving to the United States, he worked for the government and had killed many people. My best friend's mom held the Guinness World Record for the longest hula hoop session in the 70s. I'm not sure how long she held the record, but it was quite shocking to know. It was a very random piece of information. I knew a guy at work, a friendly greeting and some conversations in the break room. He disappeared a few months ago. I mentioned to another colleague how much I missed our conversations in the break room when they played old episodes of game shows and we talked about cars. The colleague told me that this guy had confided in him about the consensual relationship with his own niece that started when she was 12 years old. I hope he's rotting in jail. There's a sweet old southern lady at work who works at a small tourist trap/gas station. I was talking to her one day and it turns out she was an escort in New York and a stripper when she was in her 20s. A coworker was also a friend of mine. I was with him the night he met his wife. We worked together at a store. One day the electronics department got a high-end electric keyboard. He approached and played impressive and perfect classical music. He had trained to be a concert pianist, but he gave it up because it was his mother's dream, not his. I didn't know any of this until that moment. A coworker of ours did the same with a professional tennis career. I had a great uncle who was really strange and didn't talk much. He was the crazy old man who wandered the town for a long time. Kids would intimidate and bother him. He dressed oddly and never bathed. Turns out he was a Marine in the land assault on Iwo Jima and got shrapnel in his brain. It caused some cognitive issues and his body had trouble regulating temperature. He saw the original flag raising. He told us before it was widely known that the image was actually arrest aging. My girlfriend in college, well, she was in college. I worked in the campus cafeteria. Well, she told me on our third or fourth date that she grew up in a nudist family. Her parents were hippies. They went to Woodstock. Yeah, I'm old. It caught me by surprise because I had never met a nudist before, but it didn't scare me. We've been together for 30 years since then. My best friend. We were basically chatting online one night, and he mentions, "Oh, my dad has 50 kids." So I was like, what the hell, go on. Basically, his father had multiple affairs with multiple different women. I think he's still on the run, so he has 50 scattered half-siblings all over the United States. I think one of them tried to contact him on Facebook, but I don't know. I didn't want to keep asking more questions. My mother. I always saw her as just a mom. Sounds stupid now that I wrote it. But when she turned 14, my mother was slowly revealing parts of her past. From her father pistol whipping her in the head, which explains her scar, to being gang raped in high school, to being raped every night by a family friend when she was little, to the years of abuse, physical on my father's side, and much more. I can't think right now. She has had many face-to-face moments with death and extreme pain, but she is still alive. This was over 10 years ago. One of the boyfriends of a mutual friend of mine and my girlfriend's. A super nice and extremely fun guy. Obviously, he had a lot of money based on the gifts he gave her and always picking up the tab at expensive restaurants when we went out. Once he paid for a helicopter tour with them around Martha's Vineyard. It was never very clear what he did for work, but all we knew is that he owned his own pharmaceutical sales business and had to work closely with doctors. We just assumed he was very good at what he did and was very successful. One random day our friend called saying he had taken his own life. It was so inexplicable. He seemed so happy and carefree. Turns out he was part of a criminal network with some doctors who were committing Medicaid fraud upstate New York. If he had been convicted, he would have been looking at many years in prison. I found out that my uncle's wife was previously in something akin to a youth police force, teenagers who volunteered in the police, and had an accident because the truck they were in fell off a cliff. She was the only survivor but has had many surgeries since then, the most recent being in 2020 on her eyes. I worked in a building in London's financial district. I used to chat with one of the cleaners who was a very kind and soft-spoken man from Colombia. After a few years, while chatting over lunch, I found out that his previous job was part of the elite special forces in Colombia. He detailed the bounties on the heads of police officers, military personnel, and special forces. The rewards offered by cartels were categorized by rank. I don't remember the prices of the rewards, but it was a life-changing amount for locals. The constant fear of attack 24/7 was not a way of life for him, his wife, and his children. Now he mops floors and his family is safe. I used to work at a small computer store a long time ago, back when such things still existed. We had 4 locations across the state. I was a bench technician doing new builds and service, and I was regularly asked to cover the bench at other stores for a day or two when my coworkers weren't available. That's when I met Antoine. He was the manager of one of the branches. He was a slim man, not short but slim, stooped shoulders, thinning hair, pale skin, late 30s to early 40s. He was very quiet and quite shy. I got to know him through several rotations at his bench over a couple of years. He was an immigrant from Lebanon. His English was very good, but he was reluctant to engage in casual conversations. I think he was conscious of his accent. At the time, I was dating my now wife and had mentioned that we were planning to get married. Antoine was thrilled by this news and really opened up, showing curiosity about our future plans. Would we buy a house? Would we have children? Antoine, if you're out there, we got both long-term. He was a very sweet, gentle, introverted man. After working together for a while, he asked me a favor, to come to his home. He had bought new curtains and a curtain rod and needed help installing it. Once we installed it, he invited me to stay for dinner and he prepared a delicious meal. I had asked some questions about Lebanon, but unfortunately, I was quite misinformed about such matters. Antoine was a Lebanese Jew. He had fled Lebanon in 1985, but not before losing his wife to Hezbollah in their anti-Semitic campaign to eradicate them. He spoke at length about his experiences growing up during the Muslim-Christian Civil War and then as a young adult, roughly the age he was while we were sitting there in his small apartment, when Hezbollah's hatred towards Israel turned towards his community. He was such a sweet and kind man. The hate, the physical manifestation of his anger, was very real, and I saw it for the first time that night as he shared his memories with me. Antoine's family had lived in Lebanon for generations. He watched as his entire community turned against him over a decade as the Muslim community radicalized. Don't even get Antoine started on his opinion about the Syrians. We worked together for a few years, all those days spent quietly in the store between customers installing Windows 95 and deciding what takeout to have for lunch, talking about curtains and families. Meanwhile, this man was still fighting a war in his own mind. I found out that one of my friend's grandparents was in the Z Special Unit in World War II. These were the early Australian Special Forces. On its own, it's not a standout story, but came the day of his execution by sword. The Japanese had executed hundreds before him that day. It is suspected that it was the bluntness of the blade combined with sheer damn luck of the angle it landed on part of his neck bone. It didn't penetrate. The Japanese took it as a sign he was meant to live. To this day, that scar on his neck is the most terrifying scar I've ever seen. It looked like an impossible to survive scar, with equally terrifying 1-inch cross scars around, straight out of a horror movie. And well, friends, that was all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, let me know with a thumbs up so that YouTube can share these stories with more people. Remember to hit the bell icon to be the first to know when we upload a new video. See you next time.